After more than a decade of debate, doctors just officially renamed one of the most common conditions affecting women. PCOS is now PMOS, and that single letter change could transform how millions of women get treated.
Hi there, I'm Tony Lee, and this is Hot Flasher, your daily menopause podcast that serves up fresh news, research, and wellness tips. I've built a daily news pipeline to find the latest on women's health and menopause research. Allow me to introduce my co-host, Nikki, who handles the headlines. Take it away, Nikki.
Thanks, Tony. We've got some pretty significant news to talk through today. So, polycystic ovary syndrome just got a makeover. After more than 10 years of global consultation, medical experts have officially renamed PCOS to PMOS, polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome. And before you roll your eyes at what sounds like medical bureaucracy, this name change actually matters quite a bit. The Guardian dove into this story, and the reasoning is solid. PCOS affects 1 in 8 women, but the name has always been misleading. Not everyone with the condition actually has polycystic ovaries, and calling it a syndrome made it sound vague and poorly understood. The new name, PMOS, puts the focus where it belongs, on the metabolic and hormonal disruptions that drive the condition. This isn't just semantics. When you call something polycystic ovary syndrome, doctors tend to focus on the ovaries and reproductive symptoms, but PCOS has always been much bigger than that. It's fundamentally a metabolic condition driven by high androgen levels, affecting everything from insulin resistance to cardiovascular health. The weight gain, the excess hair, the irregular periods, those are all symptoms of deeper metabolic dysfunction. What's interesting is how long this took. Medical organisations don't rename conditions lightly, and the fact that they spent over a decade consulting globally tells you how contentious this was. But advocates pushed for it because they knew women were getting substandard care when doctors only looked at the ovarian piece of the puzzle. I'm curious to see how this plays out in practice. Will doctors start approaching PMOS differently? Will insurance companies cover metabolic treatments more readily when the condition's name literally includes the word metabolic? Sometimes these changes in language really do shift how medicine gets practiced. Speaking of shifting our understanding, there's fascinating new research from Northwestern about where estrogen actually gets made in our bodies. We've always known that ovaries produce estrogen and that production drops during menopause. But Northwestern researchers discovered that brain tissue itself produces estrogen locally and that production also declines after menopause. This is significant because it gives us a clearer picture of why cognitive changes happen during this transition. It's not just about circulating hormones from the ovaries affecting the brain. The brain tissue itself is making less estrogen, which directly impacts memory and cognitive function right where it's needed most. The research team found that this local brain estrogen production is independent of what's happening with ovarian hormones. So even if you're on hormone replacement therapy that addresses circulating estrogen levels, your brain tissue might still be producing less estrogen than it did before menopause. This could explain why some women on HRT still experience cognitive symptoms and why the relationship between estrogen and brain function is more complex than we initially thought. It also opens up new questions about how we might support cognitive health during menopause beyond traditional hormone therapy approaches. The researchers are still working out the implications, but this local estrogen production in brain tissue could become a new target for treatments specifically designed to support cognitive function during menopause. Rather than trying to replace all the estrogen your ovaries used to make, maybe we need therapies that specifically support the brain's own estrogen production. On the practical side of things, there's new research on plant-based eating and weight management during menopause. US News reported on a study showing that plant-based diets may cut obesity risk for women going through menopause. This isn't necessarily groundbreaking, but it's good to see research specifically looking at this population. Menopausal weight gain is real and it's stubborn. The hormonal changes, the metabolic shifts, the sleep disruption, everything conspires to make weight management more challenging. So, when researchers find dietary approaches that seem to help, it's worth paying attention. The study found that women following plant-based diets had lower rates of obesity during menopause compared to those eating more animal products. But, as always with nutrition research, the details matter. Was it the plants themselves, or were women eating plant-based diets also making other healthy choices? Were they exercising more, sleeping better, managing stress differently? Plant-based diets tend to be higher in fibre and lower in processed foods, which could explain some of the benefit. Fibre helps with satiety and blood sugar regulation, both of which become more important during menopause when insulin sensitivity can decline. But I think the bigger takeaway is that rigid dietary rules probably aren't the answer. The Mediterranean diet has good evidence for menopausal health. Now, plant-based eating shows promise. What these approaches have in common is that they emphasize whole foods, plenty of vegetables, and minimal processing. Rather than jumping from diet to diet, it might make more sense to focus on the principles that seem to matter, eating mostly whole foods, getting plenty of fibre, including healthy fats, and finding an approach you can actually stick with long term. The truth is, there's no magic bullet for menopausal weight management. Your metabolism is changing, your hormones are shifting, and your body's response to food and exercise isn't the same as it was in your 30s. But that doesn't mean you're powerless. It just means the strategies that work might be different from what worked before. These 3 stories, the PCOS rename, the brain estrogen research, and the plant-based diet findings, all point to the same thing. We're getting better at understanding how women's bodies actually work, rather than trying to fit everything into models designed around men's physiology. But I wonder how long it takes for this better understanding to actually change what happens in doctors' offices and how we approach our own health decisions.
Thanks for listening to Hot Flasher. We're back tomorrow with more, so don't forget to subscribe. See you tomorrow.